Good day. I am Elizabeth Akin-Odanye, and I'm giving this presentation on mental strength for productivity and general well-being at an IITA institution-wide seminar in Ibadan. And so the in-person presentation was done on the 28th of October, 2025. And I'm doing this recording after the completion of the in-person presentation. So let's quickly look at the definition of mental strength. Now, oftentimes when we talk about strength, we'd often think about it in the context of physical strength. While physical and mental strength are different, they work following similar principles. So physical strength describes our ability to deal with physical stressors, such as picking a heavy weight or performing certain numbers of push-ups or capacity to complete certain kilometers of sprints and all of that. Mental strength, on the other hand, is our ability to deal with psychological stressors. So that's the key difference between them. Physical strength has to do with our ability to deal with physical stressors, while mental strength has to do with our ability to handle psychological stressors. Now, building strength, whether mental or physical, is about building our ability to deal with greater states of stress without breaking. It's the ability to deal with negativity in a healthy way, because they will always come. But how do we deal with them? And so having mental strength does not necessarily mean that an individual is tough. It may actually mean having the ability to live authentically and cope with what life throws at you. And so it involves a person's capacity to make choices that are good for him or her, even in difficult times. So that's what mental strength is. And sometimes when we look at mental strength, we think it's an absence of infirmity. And really, mental strength could also show itself strong in spite of infirmity, whether physical or psychological. We know oftentimes mental health in a dictionary is defined as the absence of mental illness. However, not having anxiety, depression, or any other illness does not mean an individual is mentally strong. It could, in fact, mean a person is still mentally strong, even though that individual is dealing with mental health problems. So it's just how the individual is able to carry himself or herself despite what he or she is going through. And the easiest way to compare mental health and mental strength is by comparing the differences between our physical health and our physical strength. Now, physical strength may be improved with building bigger muscles, but bigger muscles don't always mean that you never have to deal with physical health issues like the common cold or having high cholesterol and all of that. So a physical health issue may indeed make it slightly more difficult to engage in workouts at the gym. However, you can still choose those options that will help you maintain physical strength or remain physically fit, even if you have physical health issues. In other words, within the limitations posed by a physical health condition, an individual could still have a variety of choices by which to build mental strength. So exercises undertaken to grow your mental strength will also strengthen your mental health. And increased mental health makes it easier to increase mental strength. And so they are both interwoven one way or the other. So they improve each other. And then it must also be noted that mental strength is plastic. And what that means is even if we do not have, even if we think we are not mentally strong, we have the capacity to build our mental strength by the things that we do. And so let's see the next slide on the origin of strength. Where does strength come from? And so while preparing this slide, I remembered my growing up and something one of my siblings went through. And by the way, the picture on the screen is that of my younger brother. And while he was transiting into secondary school, a maternal cousin took him to Lagos for a better secondary school education, so to say. But he spent so long in Lagos, we never really knew what was happening. And by the time he should have finished secondary school, he returned home. He didn't make his papers, his SSC, senior secondary school certificate exams, and he was emaciated. He used to describe himself as Cole because he was so skinny. And for a very long time, he lost his self-confidence, right? You know, he lost his self-confidence. And he wasn't happy. And so how was he able to cope with himself? He just developed, I don't know who taught him, I don't know how he came about that coping strategy, but he developed interest in sports. And he would do press ups, he would do push ups, he would carry heavy weights, he would put irons together, as his weightlifting materials. And when you enter his room, you could feel the sweat. And so he started from maybe 10 push-ups every day to 20 and on and on. But today, here he is. He does multiple push-ups, say in their hundred. He does 1,000 push-ups every day in laps of 100 or 200 at a stretch, right? And one other thing that happened with him was when he was in primary school, and the teacher gave them an assignment to state countries and their capitals, and none of them was supposed to repeat whatever someone else had said. And so then he developed an interest in the atlas, and because he didn't want to be caned, right? So he memorized countries and capitals. And so when he went to school, he was able to successfully, recite the countries and capitals he was expected to recite. And it was okay, but somehow he just developed interest in continuing. And today, if you woke him up from sleep, he could tell you at least 200 countries and their capitals, and he could even locate where they are on the map. And so, where am I going? Where I'm going is that the origin of our strength is a function of our memory. And by memory, I'm not just talking about mental memory. I'm talking about the fact that our body keeps count. Our body and our minds, they keep count of our recurrent habits, those seemingly inconsequential habits, those things we do again and again, the body keeps count. And we get the result after a while of repeated actions and behave and of doing certain things. And that is where strength comes from. Our recurrent feelings, thoughts, and actions eventually make us who we are, eventually determines whether we are strong or we are not. And so it's a function of the stressors that you did or did not overcome in the past. That's just simply what we would call mental strength. Mental strength is a function of the stressors you did or did not overcome in the past. And we could also say that with respect to physical strength, is a function of how much weight you are able to lift per time or push-ups you are able to do per time as you overcome these stressors, you become stronger and stronger as the day goes by. So, where does strength come from? Our current strength is a function of our memory. And I have just described for us what memory is in the context of this presentation. So, mental strength, if for instance, if you've done a lot of public speaking in the past, then it might really, appear easy for you now, and you will experience less stress in presenting publicly. That is because you have become someone who could easily lift the psychological weight needed to speak to thousands of people without being afraid or without shivering even as you stand. And so that is just what where strength comes from. It's a combination of our DNA, it's a combination of our eating habits, it's a combination of genes and all of those things that make us us. So it is a collection of information that we are combining to form strength. And why am I placing much emphasis on this? Is because there's a lot of intentionality in our capacity to build strength. So, while we are on the topic of building strength, because this topic is about mental strength for productivity and general well-being, I feel we should talk a little bit more about productivity and how it might affect mental health. And so when people think of being productive, right, we often think about this in terms of getting personal goals met or checking certain lists on our to-do, checking certain activities on our to-do list. And we also do know, or maybe we don't, that not everything on a task list is equally important. In other words, we place priorities and we place values on certain tasks on our list than on others. But how do we measure these values? Well, I think it's ordinarily subjective. But oftentimes we find out that when we are measuring productivity, we are looking at it in the terms of the quantity of work that has been completed. We are looking at it in terms of the quality of the work that is produced, in terms of finesse, in terms of good finishing, and quality. And then we also talk about efficiency in terms of not wasting efforts in getting that work done, and that's productivity. Another way people measure productivity in this capitalist age is in terms of money earned, right? And so if you're not earning money, then it seems like you are not productive. And so there are different ways organizations could create yardsticks for measuring productivity. But we know that value, what you are bringing to the table depends on what is important to you or the organization. And that's what you put most of your efforts into. But we must also be very careful, right, in measuring productivity solely by output, because this can be a double-edged sword. Why am I saying this? There are people that are productive, but not in terms of money or not in terms of how much they get paid for it. And we must be careful not to pull them down because they are not carrying the title of a director, chief executive, CEO, and all of that. And they're not going home with big paycheck. I'll speak specifically, say, in terms of women, homemakers, housewife, depending on the context in which that word is being used. Is just a woman that is home, taking care of the home front, managing the home front. Now, oftentimes, this woman doesn't get paid for this task, right? And at the end of the day, those that have gone to work return home and they ask, what have you been doing since morning? And all of that, that has a way of pulling down an individual's self-esteem. When we ask people struggling with one mental illness or the other, that has made it difficult for them to get employment, you find out that one of the things that they strongly want to go back to is being able to work, being able to contribute to the community. And contributing to the community, whether in the family setting or the larger community, is not often or always measured by the quantity of money. There's something called volunteering, for instance, where people will not be paid. And so where am I going? It's looking more in terms of value orientation, in terms of productivity, so that people are seen. Whatever it is that people do, even the man that may appear jobless, that repairs stuffs in the house, that person has economic value. Even if that money is not financial in terms of finance, there is something that individual is contributing. And so it's important that people are appreciated, right? And are made to feel worthy, in light of what they are contributing. Even if this is not bringing in money, not everything is measured by money. And so productivity is very important, and it could affect our mental health. And also, when an individual is struggling with a mental health issue, it could affect productivity. And especially also when there is this high demand, high pressure to deliver, high competitiveness, then it could put an individual's mental health at risk and compromise his or her mental strength. So, while we are still on the topic, let's look at the 4 A's of stress management. So generally, what is stress? I mean, in the simplest form, stress occurs when perceived demands outweighs coping resources. So every time it seems that the workplace, the family, the things around you are making more demands on you than you think you have the capacity to cope with, then that individual is stressed. And you must note the word perceived, because two people could go through exactly the same situation, the same life circumstances, and one would be stressed while the other is not stressed. And so there's that perceived the concept is subjectivity that occurs in context of stress, right? And when we look at life, there is no life that is stress-free. Even when you get a promotion, it comes with additional responsibility, right? Even when you achieve that height you desire to get to, you find out that there are more responsibilities that are stressful, even though it could be looked at as a positive stress, right? But even positive stress can be harmful if not well managed. So, what are the 4 A's of stress management? They are the avoid, alter, accept, and adapt. So, and these 4 A's, they offer different strategies for handling stressful situations. So let's look at avoid. Avoid, avoiding unnecessary stress means learning to say no to unnecessary commitments and reducing your exposure to stress in the first place. So when you reduce your exposure to stress in the first place, then you will not be stressed. And one of the ways where we get very stressed is in time management, how we use our time. And so Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talked about the 4 quadrants of time management, right? Where he talked about urgent, important, urgent, not important, important, not urgent, not important, not urgent. Now we get very stressed up when we walk in a cycle of urgent and important. It's like always putting out fire. Oftentimes, when we are at that stage where there are certain tasks that are important but not urgent, And we find ourselves often neglecting these issues until they become important and urgent. And one of the things we do, I mean, regarding our health, for instance, regarding our relationships, investing in our relationships, these are important. But at inception, they are not urgent. And because of that, we sometimes tend to neglect them until a, a problem erupts. And then we start trying to put out fire, right? And so we should work to reduce activities that are urgent and important in our lives. Oftentimes, let those activities that are urgent and important be exceptions to the case, exceptions to the rule, right? Things that just happen, that could not be planned for, that are unforeseen. Those things come up once in a while. For instance, an individual may be at work and you get a call, your child is ill and it's in the hospital and it's in a critical state. I mean, that becomes important and urgent, right? But when you've been given a task to perform and you procrastinate, and then it becomes 2 hours to the presentation or to the delivery of the task, you start hurrying, then it becomes urgent and important. So as much as possible, when we are able to manage our time properly, then we are able to avoid unnecessary stress. And then alter. Now you can alter or change a stressful situation by using different strategies, such as humor. We could use humor to diffuse a stressful situation. Um, you know, Sometimes in interpersonal contexts, we may say something that may annoy the other. And once we get to realize this, then we should just use humor to diffuse the situation and make it less stressful for us. And then understanding also the temporary nature of the situation we are going through can also help us alter the situation, knowing that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 hour, 7 days, 1 year, 5 years from today, this situation that is causing me so much stress would no longer matter. And so that can help us deal with it. Another way we could alter the situation is using rationalization, right? An example I love giving is that of a hungry man trying to pluck mango from a tree. And after throwing the wood or whatever to get at the mango, and he's not able to get to the mango, what does he do? He just hisses and says, "Who wants to eat mango that is not ripe?" And he walks away. And so even just with that statement, he has kind of consoled himself, you know. And so using rationalization, then another thing that may work in altering the situation, stressful situation, is projecting into a better place and time, right? When that stress would no longer be there. It's like being in medical school. And I know that medical school can be very stressful for students, right? But when the student projects into a time when, wow, one day I will become a doctor, I will be a consultant. Now, it eases the stress in the moment because this individual has something he's looking forward to. And so the same also happens to us in any walks of life where we find ourselves. The situation may not be palatable, but we must realize that that situation has an expiry date. When we may not know, and sometimes we do know. So we project, into a time that all of the problems and all of the struggles would no longer be there, and we would have we will overcome all of what we are dealing with. Then adapting to the stressor is another way of managing stress. And what does this mean? Is adjusting our expectations or standards when we can't change the stressor. Certain things happen, we experience certain losses, right? That we may not be able to change. And all we can do is to just adapt. In other words, that situation becomes like a new normal. And so you can do things by reframing the problem or your perspective, lowering your standard a little, not striving for perfection, and making reasonable substitutes, where possible, right? There's always a substitute. There's always something we are able to substitute that will help us adapt. And that is one of the one of the gifts we have as humans, our capacity to adapt, to situations as much as possible. Then accepting things we cannot change. We must learn to recognize and accept things we cannot change. Know what you can change, right? And you do something about them, right? Alter the situation, avoid the stress and all of that. But those things you cannot change, then recognize them and accept them. And accepting, when I'm talking about acceptance here, I'm not looking at it in terms of fatalistic attitude or a sense of helplessness. Acceptance here is deliberately knowing and making a choice to accept a situation. It does not necessarily mean that you are happy about that situation, but you recognize it for what it is and know it is what it is, right? Aha. So that's just accepting. And so sometimes acceptance or accepting a situation that cannot be changed could just simply mean letting go of that anger or letting go of that resentment and negativity. It could mean forgiving yourself and forgiving other people, for whatever wrong they may have done to you or you may have done to them. So acceptance is just embracing what you cannot change and accommodate them into your reality. So, mental strength reservoir leakages. Now, mental strength reservoir leakages are the subtle but persistent habits and thought patterns that drain your emotional and mental energy over time if they go unchecked. So, and if this leaks go unaddressed, they can lead to burnout and work context. They can lead to poor focus and a reduced capacity to handle challenges, and by extension, results in diminished productivity and decreased overall well-being. And so we must be able to look at this mental strength reservoir leakages, like negative self-talks. What are those things we are talking, those things we are telling ourselves that are, 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 are putting holes in the balloons, right? Causing little leaks, causing the strength in us to drain away those doubts, those self-talks, fear of failure, not being able to accept the possibility of failing. And the truth is, when you are afraid of failure, then you do not try, right? You do not try to handle that stress. And if you never handle that stress, then you can never build that strength that you need or the confidence that you would need to face that situation when next it arises. Toxic relationships also can also be mental reservoir leakages for mental strength, right? There are people that talk us down. Now, I would normally say that you can't choose who your parents are, you can't choose who your friends are, but you can choose, you can't choose who your siblings are. Your family members you can't choose, but you can choose who you relate with. You can choose who your friends are. And so when people, continually talk you down, make you feel less than yourself, or you find out that there's always quarreling and misunderstanding with a particular person, look for a way to manage that situation, right? And you could also use avoid unnecessary stress issue. It's not that you are fighting or quarreling with the individual, but you create a distance, just for your own mental strength. And anything like that causes emotional pain, anger, holding on to past resentments and all of that are definitely leakages. And the lack of boundaries, are leakages. Anything that happens, anything that you do or someone does to you that makes you go home and you are just asking yourself, why did I do it? Why did I allow it? It just might mean that there is a boundary breach at that point in time, and something needs to be done in order to block those leakages. So, how do we build mental strength? So, building mental strength is what we'll look at now. So, one of the ways for us to build mental strength is to maintain a clear sense of purpose. But for us to maintain a clear sense of purpose, we must first create a vision of where we are going, of the kind of meaningful life that we desire. Because if you do not have that clear vision, that map, because that vision provides for you the map to get to where you are going. And so you must have that picture in your mind. What kind of future do I desire for myself? And once you are able to create a vision of that desirable future, then you can start finding your route to that place. So you start trying to find a way to get to that destination. So without purpose and direction, nothing will change, right? You just get tossed to and fro by the wind. And what that causes you is negative mood, right? It takes away from the mental strength. And so the idea is having a vision of where you want to be, where, and so that whatever you do is now aligned with that vision for yourself. So maintaining a clear sense of purpose helps you to conserve your resources in terms of energy and time by helping you to be intentional in all that you do. And just like you wouldn't like to take the exit off the highway, uh, and you don't want to get off track by acting impulsively, right? Sometimes we travel and we have several exits on the highway, but it's only one that will take you to your destination. And we do not want to be having trial and errors. And so the way to avoid trial and error is to have a clear sense of where you are going. And that way you will not be acting impulsively. So, and when you fight, then you are not likely to fight like one that beats the air. You are focused, you know your target, and you are able to hit that target. So be calm, focused, and controlled because you know where you are going. So, how can we respond thoughtfully in those situations that can prevent us from acting impulsively? And so, before acting, or when you find yourself reacting, then stop and think better. BETA. So B stands for breath. And so breath means you hold your breath and you release it. And this induces calmness, even in the face of chaos, right? That's holding your breath and releasing it stops you from acting impulsively, allows you the opportunity to call your wise mind up. And then you are able to evaluate the situation. And so when you are evaluating the situation, you are not evaluating it based on assumptions. You are evaluating it based on the fact that any other person can see, not based on how you feel, not based on what you perceive, but based on the tangibles, on ground that are objective, that are measurable. And then think about the best response to get you closer to your goals. Remember, we've already set a vision. We already have a place, a target, a direction in mind. And so you want to be sure that the decision you are making, the choice you are going to be making, when you think about your best response, will be a choice that would lead you to the direction and the destination you are focused on achieving. So whatever you choose must lead you or be taking you towards that direction. So that way you are not wasting time, you are not wasting effort, and you have to act tentatively. That is the A, acting tentatively. And what this means is by the time you evaluate and think about your options, you have different possible choices. And so you act tentatively by picking an option, work on it, If it solves the problem, if it addresses the situation, great. Then move on. But if it doesn't, then you look at the next option. And so that is the idea of acting tentatively. And so don't feel like you are stuck and you have no choice. There's always a choice. So the important thing is when you act tentatively, you are not just waiting for the change to happen, you are making it happen. So, the other way of building your mental strength is to see the big picture. In other words, don't just notice the thorns, notice the flowers, notice the roses, right? Notice the beauty in the roses. So notice the roses and the thorns in your life. Recognize that it's not all just rainbows, but it's not all just clouds and rain either. So there's always a flip side to each coin. No matter how bad the situation is, there's always something good you can pick out of it if you dare look closer, if you dare examine it again. And so you need to reflect on which parts are and are not within your control, right? So having assessed the threats and the opportunities and the threats and the strengths and weaknesses, then look at which parts are within my control, which parts are not. And so there's no need wasting time and energy on what is out of your control. Rather, commit to using your energy on addressing the things that you can control and that you can do to improve the next moment, right? So just working on a moment by moment. What can I do to improve the next moment? What can I do to feel better? And that will lead me closer to my desired goal, to the desired meaningful life that I have pictured for myself. And when the thing is not something you can control, that's out of your control, then you are intentional in choosing how you react to them. You are intentional in choosing. Now you can't stop a bird, for instance, from flying over your head, right? But you can stop that bird from maybe building a nest on your head. And so the general idea is certain things happen that we may have no control over, but we always have control over how we respond to those situations. So let's always see the big picture. That would help us build mental strength even in life's adversity. So take care of yourself. To be mentally strong, you have to take care of yourself. And that's why at the beginning, we talked about strength, we talked about physical and mental strength, knowing that they tie into each other. When you take good care of yourself in terms of the physical, then your mind is inhabiting a healthy body. And so it's easier for you to think better, to be more productive, and to be able to adapt to situations. And so it's important that we take care of ourselves. And so it's important to establish consistent routines that support your physical and mental health. Get enough sleep, eat healthfully, stay hydrated, rest, and address anything that causes you pain, right? From time to time, we have injuries, we are stressed, we are tired, but we must choose to rest. And when I'm talking about rest here, it does not have to be taking 1 month leave to the Bahamas. And that is what we call rest. Even in our day-to-day work, we could rest, right? I'd advocate for us to, even if it is 1 minute in every 60 minutes that makes an hour, that you choose to rest. You rest, you work, you rest, you work, you become more productive than if you wait to be burnt out before you choose to rest. No, let's rest and work intermittently. That would help. And sometimes when we think about rest, it could just be us just lying down. It could be us just focusing on our breath, just listening to music, just something that you know helps you relax. It's important. And so, same thing with recharge. We have different ways of helping ourselves to recharge. We've talked about maybe eating well and all of that could also help us recharge. And be patient for yourself. Be patient with yourself to recover, right? Not thinking about everything in terms of competition and all of that. No, be patient and deal with anything that could cause you physical vulnerability. If you are cold, you have pains or aches, you don't tough it out. No, deal with them, acknowledge them, treat them as much as possible, and that means you have to have self-compassion. You have to have self-compassion. Sometimes we hold ourselves to such high level of perfection and expecting to always be perfect at all times. I can never go wrong. I can never make mistakes, right? That is a recipe for disaster. As humans, we have limitations, right? And so we will do our best. But if we have a 99%, it's still okay, right? Even if it's 70, just allowing yourself some self-compassion, cutting yourself, some slack sometimes also goes a long way, right? Just know that you are human and be compassionate. Sometimes you find it easier to show compassion to others than we show to ourselves. So let's be compassionate to ourselves. And something else is you don't want to take responsibility for other people's feelings. And that's part of being self-compassionate, right? You don't want to feel, oh, I made him angry, and so before you know, you are taking on blames for things you ought not to take on blames for. And so if an individual does tell you that, oh, you did XYZ to me, and I feel hurt, of course you would apologize. And where it's possible to compromise, to change your ways, you do. But you do not want to take responsibility for another person's feelings. Take responsibility for your own feelings. Own your feelings, right? Let the other person own his or her feelings, but act, in a compassionate way, both to yourself and to others. Another thing is taking back your power. And that is part of self-care, taking back your power. And what that means, that could mean forgiving yourself or others. It could also mean setting safe boundaries. It could also mean owning your own experiences, owning your past traumatic experiences where possible, and helping yourself to reintegrate into those situations. So, what do I mean? Now, there are times where, okay, let's give an example of, say, a lady was jilted by her boyfriend, and they used to go to her favorite restaurant together, and perhaps that was where he jilted her, and because of that, even though she loves going to the restaurant, she avoids going there because it brings back memory, and not going there does not make her feel good with herself. It does not make her feel happy. What can she do? She can take this back. So yes, it could be temporarily anxiety provoking and annoying and distressing, but she could go with some of her friends to this venue and go again and again until she takes her power back. The distress associated with that condition is no longer there. And so something I'd normally say is that the brain is not so smart, right? The brain would act on what you have fed the brain. And so if you see a situation and you describe the situation as dangerous, then the brain is only doing its work to protect you. It ignites the HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal gland axis, to protect you. The fight or flight response system is triggered, right? Because you look at a benign and innocent and a harmless situation as dangerous, and you tell your brain that this thing is dangerous, then the brain will bring up all of those responses, palpitations, sweating, and all of those stress response to help you cope. So you can either run or you fight. But you need to take your power back and let your brain know that this situation is not as stressful as I think it is. And so you build your emotional muscle, you build your mental strength by exposing yourself again and again, gradually, to that situation until you become acclimatized, or your brain becomes used to it, and repair it as not being dangerous after all, right? So take care of yourself, take back your power. And it may also be important to also set safe boundaries, right? You need to set boundaries. And one of the ways you can set boundaries is by assertive communication. Being able to use the I statements to communicate your needs, to communicate what you want, right? It's part of taking care of yourself and not allowing people to just do things that offend you, make you feel offended, and all of that. And so you could set boundaries by letting people know, I feel this way whenever you do something like this. And I'd rather you change, or I'd rather you stop doing this, else. I mean, just frame it some way that can help you have a sense of control over your boundaries. Then cooperate, don't compete. People who are mentally strong cooperate instead of competing with others. They embrace an abundance mindset. They embrace their strengths and know what they bring to the table. They know what they are good at. They know what they do, with ease. And they also identify their weaknesses. They know what they struggle with, right? And they don't hold it against themselves. I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. We can't be perfect. We can't be good in all things, right? So it is what it is. So instead of holding your weakness against yourself, then find and partner with people who have the strengths where you are weak. And so they make up for where you are weak, and you could use your own strength to also make up for where another person is weak. So ultimately, it's usually a lot more efficient and productive, right? If you do your strengths and you allow other people to do their strengths, and then you use this to complement each other. And so you can achieve your desired goal a lot faster and then with limited stress. And so synergizing with people whose strength is your weakness is key in this matter. So celebrate and mourn with others. Celebrating with others increases different types of good hormones and neurotransmitters that helps us feel good, right? You know, just the same way laughter can be infectious. When you celebrate with people who are succeeding, who are, happy for one thing or the other, there's that sense that, oh, if it has happened to a member of my team, if it has happened to a family member or a friend or a neighbor, then it is possible that it can also happen to me. So it increases that abundance mentality when we celebrate with others. It helps in the release of hormones like oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin. These are good hormones, right? That helps us have the right mood. And so when it comes to those parties, it is not just about the joy of eating jollof rice or dressing up and dancing to music. It's about mutual reinforcement of hope. It's about gratitude and a sense of belonging. And it rewires our brain for optimism. It helps us know that it is possible. And these are core nutrients of mental strength. They are core nutrients. And so it's important that we are able to celebrate with others. Now, we should also realize that mental strength is not about suppressing feelings, right? Feelings are there for a reason, right? Whether they are pleasant feelings or unpleasant feelings. They are there for a reason, right? And they serve certain purposes and functions per time. And so mental strength is not about suppressing feelings, but it's about expressing them, even when they are unpleasant feelings, expressing them in healthy ways. So while mourning, that is the social or outward expression of grief, may be stressful, right? It can also help build social support and help us gain perspective to appreciate life more, right? It could help us appreciate what we have now. What we have now could help us appreciate it. And so we should mourn with those that mourn and rejoice with those that rejoice. And then it's also important that we embrace change. We should embrace change. I mean, I, for one, am an individual that I love stability a lot. And I guess some of you listening too might also like stability. I don't like sudden changes, right? It stresses me up. But I have come to stop struggling, with the fact that a constant part of life is change. And so instead of struggling with change, then we could also prep ourselves, right, for change. Prep yourself for possibility of change and how to embrace it. And sometimes thinking about how can I even use this change to my advantage. I said earlier that there is always a flip side to a coin. So even when this change is here, then ask yourself, how can I use this change to my advantage? Mentally strong people, they don't resist change because resisting change sometimes can actually be like a waste of energy, right? And so it's just important that we learn to embrace change and then also realize that lots of things may make little changes in us every now and then. And sometimes even without us realizing it, there are things that happen. I mean, it's like when we talk about learning, for instance, we say learning means relatively permanent change in behavior. And so in life, almost every day we wake up, there's something new we learn. And when we learn something new, it brings about a subtle change, a subtle shift in our perceptions, in the things we look out for, right? Each day. And so we should learn to embrace change. And change is constant, but hopefully the change that comes to us, they are good. They are good things. They are things we desire. But sometimes they are not, right? We can't always plan for the kind of change that we have. But you have to practice what we call radical acceptance, reminding yourself that it is what it is. I mean, if the change come, it is what it is. And oftentimes also, when you look at it, you really have promotion or get to the next level, or you really get closer to that your desired dream of a beautiful future without a change. You must leave a class to the next, and sometimes you may leave some friends behind, right? So there is that change that we must embrace. And then something else we could do in terms of embracing change is, we talked earlier about not competing with others, right? So instead of competing with others or comparing ourselves with them, then we could look at comparing ourselves to ourselves. In other words, you could look at yourself and ask yourself, what one thing can I change today that can make me better than yesterday? You are not concerned about Mr. B or Mr. A. Of course, Mr. A or B may have something, oh, that's your desire, right? And that you also look forward to achieving, right? But you don't want to compare yourself with someone else because you will always find yourself falling short, right? Just compare yourself with yourself. Look to be a better version of who you are today than who you were yesterday. And those things come about with little changes that we make, little changes that we make. So identify changes in your life that you can choose to embrace instead of struggling with. So let's be patient and persistent. Rome wasn't built in a day. And so building mental strength is about patience and perseverance. Slow is a rare virtue today. Everybody wants instant gratification. Enter uni day one, graduate day two. No, true productivity, true success does not happen in that way. We must learn to trust the process, and we must learn to walk the path. No matter how long it takes, you will get there. And so the idea is focusing on progress, not perfection. Just be patient and be consistent. So protect your mental space, stay steady, and value patience over haste. I think there's this common saying that says more haste, less speed, right? Just slow and steady, no matter what we say. Even when hurrying, excessive hurrying does not really often make that much difference, right? So let's be patient. When you find yourself just feeling overwhelmed, just think better. Take in that deep breath, reevaluate the situation, right? Think about your options and act tentatively. Just give yourself that pace so that you are not always chasing out fire or putting out fire. No, slow can be beautiful. Slow can be a virtue. So use emotions as a catalyst. Emotions are like smoke or burglar alarms, right? They are designed to tell us that something might need to be done, that we may need to take an action. But if the alarm goes off, right, and we just remain seated on the couch and we are saying, oh, is that a smoke alarm? Is a burglar at the door? You just keep on that spot without taking action to do something about it. And so the idea is use your emotion as a catalyst. That emotion, that tingling anxiety, that tingling motivation, means you need to get up and go see if there's a fire, if there's a burglar, and go see what do I need to do. And so when you have that nudge, that emotion is stirring in you, act on it. As just go check, be sure of what is happening. And then you can choose to change the situation. I mean, you go check, is there a burglar? Is there a fire? If there is, I mean, there's no smoke without fire, right? Is there a fire? Do I need to put it off? Change the situation. And you can change your response to the situation by letting it go. And then you can also choose to remain miserable. Just remember that the choice is yours, and we are never choiceless. So what you do with your emotions, there's nothing wrong with emotions. It is what we do with our emotions that really matters. And then we must also remember that emotions are designed to get us up, and so they are good. We don't want to get rid of our emotions, right? But just dwelling on those things that give us anxiety would not chase the anxiety away, will not chase the worry away. But we need to take action, right? To do what needs to be done. But having said that, we must also know that emotional intelligence begins with knowing when not to trust your emotion, right? Because emotions are fleeting. And you must always realize that emotions, even though sometimes they appear so compelling, they are just suggestions. They are, what's the other word I'm looking for? They are just suggestions, right? They are opinions. They are not facts. And so we don't want to just trust our emotions and always act on our emotions. And so we must find a balance. right? And so maybe we are having a bad day. And right there in our mind, we're just feeling, I just want to jump off this high rising building. Are we to trust that emotion? No, you don't have to act on that emotion. And so realize that emotional intelligence begins with knowing when not to trust yourself, knowing when not to trust your emotions. But emotions are good. Emotions are important. Emotions can act as catalysts to get us moving in the right direction. But we must extract that emotion and ensure that the emotion is taking us to that desirable, meaningful life that we desire, that we want to get to at some point. So we should know that emotions are not commands, but rather they are conversations inviting us to recalibrate. That is just what they are. And so we must not just think that, oh, because I feel it, then it is true. No, it's just suggestion. It's just hypothesis, if we can call it that, right? They are not facts. So purpose and contribution. A sense of purpose, um, well, this seems similar to focus on all of that. Well, a sense of purpose strengthens the mind. Contributing to something bigger than you helps you find meaning to your efforts and struggle. And so it's important to just know that when you have a sense of purpose, when you are contributing to a bigger good, a larger good, something that is even bigger than yourself, it gives you meaning in your struggle, right? I remembered when I didn't really get a formal job on time. And at that period, I mean, I had periods where I wasn't really feeling good with myself. But somewhere along the line, I started volunteering, right, with my supervisor. And just that mere volunteering gave me a new sense of purpose, right? Because I could see all the patients I was attending to then, they appreciated me. And they, oh, doctor, thank you for the other day. And I felt I was contributing, right? And so it's not about money. Sometimes contributing to a larger purpose, I mean, even if you do not have a purpose, sometimes people struggle with finding purpose, right? Then you could also look at, is there any other kind of purpose that looks good enough? I mean, someone else is doing a laudable work in the field. You could just decide to join that individual and just, you could be finding your own purpose there. But at least you're not just there, you are contributing to something. So be driven by purpose, not just by ambition, right? When you have purpose, then there is a why. And when you find a why, you can cope with anything that comes your way. So be gently persistent. A sense of purpose strengthens the mind. Gentle persistence is a compassionate approach to building mental strength, right? Instead of pushing through with harsh self-discipline, toughing it out, this method uses small, consistent actions to create lasting change that is less prone to burnout. You know, I told you that the body keeps record of all of those activities, our mind keeps record, those seemingly inconsequential habits, right? So just being steady, being gentle, not having to struggle, right? Just be consistency, habits consistently, helps us in growing mental strength. The gentle approach prioritizes showing up regularly rather than giving a monumental but unsustainable effort. Just ensuring that you show up, you do your part, a commitment to yourself. Just do your part consistently. And gentle persistence works with your natural state, not against it. With who you are, not against it. Forcing an outcome can lead to resistance and tunnel vision, while a gentle approach encourages flexibility and adaptability. It understands that some things, like healing and growth, simply cannot be rushed. They will happen in time. Just do your part gently, consistently, persistently. This process builds confidence and creates a steady, calm foundation for navigating life's challenges. Persistence is more powerful than aggression. Keep moving forward. Gentle consistency changes even the hardest condition, just like consistent drop of water could bore hole even in a rock. So practice metacognition and mindfulness. Metacognition appears like a big word, but it's just about thinking about thoughts, giving yourself opportunity to self-reflect. Sometimes thought journaling, right, helps. Writing your thoughts down, reflecting on this, your thoughts helps. Sometimes we need to just step back and ask ourselves, why am I doing what I am doing now? Why am I feeling this way? Why did I respond the way that I did? What assumptions am I making right now? This kind of thoughts about our thoughts can help us feel grounded and also help us find loopholes where they exist in our assumptions, right, concerning issues. And they help us become more intentional. Also, we should engage in mindful meditations. Oftentimes, we just go through life, you know, just like that, without being mindful, without paying attention, right? But when we think about, say, when you are walking in a muddy area and you are putting on, let's say, a white gown or pants, and you're walking in a muddy area, let me say even brown mud, there is a way you will walk on tiptoes, paying attention to the details around you so you don't get stained, so your garment is not stained. And that is the same way engaging in mindful meditation, you know, could help us. It helps us to observe our thoughts without judgment, increases, our awareness of what we are feeling. It helps us live in the present. And so things may be happening around us. We notice them for what they are. Things may be happening within us, emotions within us. We just notice them. Oh, I'm feeling anger. But I'm not labeling the anger as good or bad. I'm just stating what I am feeling. I'm just stating what I am seeing and experiencing. And I'm not adding layers of emotion upon what is there. No. So engaging in mindful meditation creates self-awareness and helps us, retain a sense of calm. So never fear to seek help. Never fear to seek help. Vulnerability is one of the earliest and most adaptive expressions of human strength. We often express or equate strength with independence, control, and self-sufficiency. Yet, one of the most powerful symbols of strength is the human baby, completely dependent, utterly vulnerable, and still able to evoke protection, love, and care from others. A baby's survival depends not on defense or toughness, but on its openness and willingness to be cared for. So, in the same way, our own emotional and psychological well-being often begins where we dare to admit that we have needs. When we allow ourselves to say, I am struggling, I need help, or I can't carry this alone, then we create a space for empathy, connection, and healing. Vulnerability becomes the bridge that allows others to reach us. So, true mental strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It is the courage to remain open in a world that tempts us to close off. And like a baby's cry that draws comfort rather than rejection, our honest expression of weakness can awaken care and deepen the bonds that sustain us. Likewise, trying to avoid um, or trying to just try to avoid believing that mentally strong people never ask for help. It takes you to be extremely mentally strong to admit that you don't have all the answers or to recognize that you need help. Mentally strong people know when to ask for help and they ask for help. So, practice balanced spirituality. I call it balanced spirituality. And there's a slight difference between spirituality and religiosity. With religion, there would be a need for a structure, um, um, it's more formal, right? But spirituality may not go the route of religion, but it has similarities with religion because spirituality, there are activities you need to do, right? Your spirituality is not in the air. There are certain things you need to do to strengthen your spirituality. And just like with religion, there are certain rites. And so in that place, in that area, they could appear similar. But there is that thin line between them. Spirituality is more personal and more intimate. And it often relates more, well, it could even hold with or without the concept of God, but there is that sense of a connection with a higher order, right? Something yellow called the ultimate rescuer, so to say, right? So there's that spirituality that helps us build mental strength by fostering a sense of purpose, providing calming mechanisms, and improving emotional resilience. It's like a an anchor that you could hold on to when the storms come. That's how I see spirituality, no matter your religion, right? So religion could be a vehicle for spirituality, but spirituality could also hold without a religion. But there's often a frame of reference that guides the practice of spirituality. And so, I mean, an example I would always give is, for instance, I am a Christian, right? And as a Christian, there is the Bible, and with the Bible, there are promises. And so you need to study that book or that Bible, uh, whatever it is, the philosophy guiding that religion, so that you can imbibe it, right? You can live it. Because it is in living it. Remember, we talked about consistency. And so it's when there are these precepts, philosophies that guide you, then you live it. You know it, you live it. And that is where you grow the strength. And then there's a need to build a community or join a community of like minds so that you could strengthen each other, support each other, where the need arises as much as possible. However, when it comes to spirituality, even though it's very, very important, I often caution that you do not overdo it. Be careful not to overdo it. Let's practice our spirituality in a way that brings peace and balance to our lives, not stress or pressure. And by prioritizing spiritual health in a balanced way, we can also build stronger minds and live more fulfilling lives. So the idea is we know that as humans, we are not self-sufficient, right? we are not self-sufficient. And sometimes we need something, an anchor to hold on to, a belief system, right? To hold on to. Like for me, I just know that the thought that I think towards you is of good, not of evil, to give you an expected end, to give you a hope and a future. And so the idea is even when the storm comes, I hold on to that anchor. And so you must have an anchor that you hold on to. Sometimes we call it sagacity, right? That word that you bring up and you talk about. You know, some people will say tough times don't last, but tough people do. And that is the philosophy by which they live their lives. So look for that anchor as a way of practicing your spirituality. But spirituality is something that we practice as a way of life, not touch and go. And so we have to live it so that it could actually work for us. And so, in conclusion, building mental strength is a lifelong process that strengthens both productivity and well-being. Invest in yourself. Small, consistent steps build enduring strength. I hope you've been able to gain some ideas on things that you might try to help you build your mental strength. Thank you.